Welcome to another edition of the Mainly Hoops Best Bets episode. Um, slow night tonight, just really Kansas and Iowa State at 9 o'clock, and then Virginia somehow beating up on Pittsburgh. But tomorrow's a much better day, back to normal. Tuesday's usually one of the best days of the week. That's really headlined by there's some SEC games, but first game we're gonna talk about in terms of the betting world is Marquette at St. John's, and Marquette here is plus 3.5.
Yeah, and had a positive day on Saturday for first time in a little bit. Kind of had a rough week before that, but ended up making close to 3 units on Saturday. So pretty positive day. Didn't have anything on Sunday or tonight, but pretty decent card on Tuesday. But yeah, I definitely lean towards Marquette here. It's nothing official yet. It might end up being a play. I lean towards this side pretty hard. I mean, I've faded St. John's a lot, and I think it's justified. Honestly, I think they've been kind of just skirting by a lot of these teams that are they're pretty inferior teams that they've been playing, and you can really poke holes in their resume right now. Their conference schedule so far has been DePaul, Providence twice, Butler, then Xavier twice, Georgetown twice, Seton Hall, and their only loss is to Creighton, who is probably the best team on that list. So they haven't had to play UConn or Marquette yet, I think, and they haven't really had all that inspiring performances against the bottom of the league. They've had a couple blowout wins, but they were losing to Georgetown, losing to Xavier pretty significantly, and they almost just lost to Providence on Saturday. I just think they've been pretty fortunate to get through that portion of the schedule at 10-1, albeit they haven't even played the top of the league yet. They don't really have any like huge resume wins. Like played Georgia, lost to them early in the year. I'd say New Mexico probably is their best win right now.
Was it them that played Baylor too?
Played Baylor, lost at the buzzer. Yeah. Pretty unfortunate loss there, but they also shot like 14 for 24 from three in that game, and easily their best shooting performance of the year, and they still couldn't win the game. So I do think they're definitely overvalued right now. I'm not extremely high on Marquette, but I thought they were the better team on Saturday against UConn. They forced 24 turnovers in that game, and UConn just happened to shoot 12 of 19 from three. So in the second half, especially, I thought Marquette outplayed UConn. They were just they're playing catch up after that early run where UConn started the game like 6 of 8 from three. And for Marquette on the offensive side, I'm not really all that high on them either, but I do think they've underperformed so far in conference play. And I like how Marquette's defense especially matches up with St. John's. I think the ball pressure can really bother St. John's. It's kind of looked like St. John's has figured out their ball security issues from early in the season, as they're only 59th in turnover rate right now in the nation. But there's only really two teams in this entire league, or three teams in this league, that actually pressure the ball at a high rate, and that's Georgetown, who they played twice and they struggled with, Seton Hall, who they struggled with even though they blew them out, and Marquette. Marquette's probably the best one of the three, and they haven't had to play them yet. I think it can give them some real issues. There's a lot of different drop coverage defenses and conservative defenses in this league. Like, Creighton and Providence are the heaviest drop coverages in the entire country. So they're not really going to bother you on that side of the ball. So I do think there's some underlying stuff that, like, Georgia gave them issues as well early in the season. And Marquette also swarms the rim on defense and forces teams to play in their spot up and catch and shoot game. And St. John's is absolutely not willing to do that. I think they're still going to try to get to the rim. And I think Marquette has some resistance in that area. And on the other side of the ball, I think Marquette's ability to take care of the ball at the best rate in the entire country. They have the lowest turnover rate in the nation. I think that'll play up in this game, and they have the ability to score over the top of St. John's rim denial defense that will give up some threes. And I think they've been a tad fortunate in conference play. I do think the St. John's is a good all-around defense, but they do create a lot of their value by denying the rim and turning you over. And I think Marquette has some ways to score against this defense. And it's always tough you can't really fade Shaka Smart as an underdog. He's unbelievable as an underdog throughout his entire career as a head coach. I believe he's around 60% ATS last time I saw it. I haven't seen the actual number pop up this year, but he's perennially been over 60% against the spread as
which
an underdog.
which is why he struggled at Texas, because they weren't the
Yeah,
underdog much.
he's the opposite as a double digit favorite. He's terrible, but when you put
Yeah.
him in the underdog role, they always thrive mostly because they win the shot volume battle, especially in the turnover area, and they just happen to play motivated every single night, and especially when they play against a team that they're technically not supposed to beat. He just finds a way to motivate his team and always gets them to play up. So I like getting the points here. Not completely sure if I'll play it at 3.5. I would love to see, some St. John's bettors here get this thing to 4.5. But I actually don't mind playing this on the money line because we've seen St. John's really struggle in first halves or just have a really rough 10 to 15 minute stretch throughout the course of a game. So I think having a position on Marquette money line is really good if you want to come back the other way and potentially try to middle this game and get St. John's at a plus number or taking them plus the points at some point in the game. I've had success doing that against St. John's this season, and I think this is a pretty good spot to do that too.
Yeah, it feels like, what we've seen from St. John's, they have some of those stretches where they play terrible. You can't do that against Marquette, especially the way that they turn you over. If you do that against Marquette, it's going to be too much to overcome. So I think the St. John's, whatever, the hot stretch they're on, whatever you want to call it. I don't even know if I really want to call it that because of who they played, but I think that it stops tomorrow. I actually like them on the money line. I would probably rather take the points just because of the security of that. But like this overhyping of St. John's, I think needs to stop. Like they're a good team, but they're not an elite team by any stretch, or they're not a 19-3 really level team.
No, they do have deficiencies on the offensive end. Like I think they're sitting at 95th in adjusted offense on Torvik, but they have the third ranked defense in the entire country. I don't know if part of that's schedule driven, but I truly do think this is one of the most elite defenses in the country. But they just have real issues, especially if they're not going to be able to take care of the ball. Leading to runouts for Marquette is just leading to easy baskets is only going to give Marquette an easier chance to win this game when they don't have to play against a set Johnny's half court defense.
Yeah, no doubt. Next game, we talked about it a bit last night in our regular episodes, but UCLA hosting Michigan State. Michigan State playing the second of their West Coast swing here. UCLA is minus 2.5 here.
Yeah, I love UCLA in this spot. I would have loved for Michigan State to end up beating USC to make this an even better spot for UCLA, but that stuff's kind of overblown at times. I think it's just the ascension of UCLA's offense that has me pretty excited about them, and I think they're trending back towards where they were earlier in the season, at least the perception of them, and a lot of it is because of the addition of Adai Mara into the rotation. They've had in the 4 games that he's played over 20 minutes a game. When Bilodeau went down with an injury, I believe he played like 25 minutes, and then he's played at least 20 minutes a game since then. Even when Bilodeau came back, they had 3 of their best offensive performances of the season, in adjusted efficiency wise per Torvik. That 3 of their top 4 of the entire season. So there's definitely something to Mara being in there. The post-up game has been super efficient. They've been scoring inside the arc at an elite clip in their last 4 games. And matching the interior presence of Michigan State is huge, as that's where the Spartans really create all of their value on both sides of the ball. So maybe turning that into an even or even just less of an advantage for Michigan State ends up turning it into a huge advantage for UCLA. And I just think the rim gravity of that Adai Mara brings to the table it's created open looks for UCLA's perimeter, and they've been knocking down shots lately. I don't know how much longer they're going to knock down shots at a 40% clip, but I do think they've been getting way more open shots than they have in the past without Mara in the rotation. Teams have just been okay with playing Bilodeau one-on-one, forcing him to score in the mid-range. But if you don't have a match for Mara, you're going to have to send a second guy, and it's just going to lead to, this UCLA team is still talented on the perimeter, I think, and you leave these guys open, they're going to make you pay. And on the defensive side of the ball for UCLA, I think they match up extremely well. And this is like the main reason why I'm going to take this bet here. UCLA is in the 9th percentile in opponent rim rate frequency per synergy, and Michigan State basically relies on getting to the rim. They're 98th percentile in rim rate and 95th percentile in efficiency. But when you force them to on the perimeter, if UCLA can keep them away from the rim, which I typically trust the defensive style to, kind of avoid a team from being able to execute what they want to. Um, if you force Michigan State to perform from the outside, it's not very pretty for them. They shoot just 28% from three this season. They don't really have any shooting on this roster besides Jaden Akins, and Jaden Akins is only shooting 28% from three this season. I think he's a better shooter than that, but I don't think it's. I mean, we're pretty far into the season at this point where I'm not really sure where or when that shooting's going to show up. So I think UCLA has a big time advantage there in being able to keep Michigan State away from the rim and keeping them off the glass. Their rebound rates improved since Mara's been in the rotation. And UCLA should also win the turnover battle here. UCLA is 4th in the nation in turnover rate defense, and Michigan State actually isn't all that good with the ball. That's not very typical of a Tom Izzo team, but this backcourt's a little bit younger. They're 157th in offensive turnover rate in the entire country. So definitely some issues with the guards for Tom Izzo's squad. But my only worry in this game would be the transition defense of UCLA. It's pretty poor. This front court duo of Mara and Bilodeau struggles to get back in transition a bit. So, but if UCLA can score the ball efficiently enough, which I think they can in their post-up game, I think it'll limit the runouts of Michigan State. So I think that's another advantage for them. And like I said, their offense is trending up, and I believe they have a top 20 defense in the country right now. So I really like where UCLA is at right now, and I think there's value in this.
Yeah, I would agree. I was just looking back at Michigan State's 3-point percentage from last season as a team, and it's a far cry from this season. They're over 36% as a team last year. I know it's a much different team where they play a lot more. They play a lot bigger, but still, right? Like in certain matchups, especially ones like this, it's going to be tough for them to overcome that if Akins isn't making shots, or some of their other guards. So I think that UCLA is really in a good spot here. They're going to probably keep it rolling. I don't know how many wins they're up to in a row now. I know they're at least 5, but
yeah, I think it's 5 right now.
Yeah, they're playing really good basketball, and maybe Mick Cronin got them motivated after his outrage at the way they were playing a few weeks ago. So good to see them back playing good ball. Still not sure if he'll be there next year, but we'll see.
Yeah, I don't know if he's just not a West Coast guy. I think he's more of an East Coast head coach, more of a grit and grind kind of style, and it's not really what an LA school typically likes to do.
Yeah. Next one also tomorrow, Iowa, Purdue. Iowa at home here, and we like Iowa plus 7.5.
Yeah, I apologize in advance for anybody that makes this wager, but I feel like I have to. I think the matchup is just way too significant here for Iowa, and I do think Purdue's overvalued at this point, especially on the defensive side. We've talked about it a little bit here. Teams are shooting just 31% from three against them in league play, and they lose shooters open quite often when they're trying to deny the rim more often now with their lack of a rim protector. And that's led to 65% of opponents' catch and shoot opportunities being unguarded. And they're 97th percentile in defending unguarded catch and shoot, which I've said on here before. That's entirely a luck stat. If nobody's guarding you, it just comes down to luck whether you make it or not. And they are one of the best teams in the country, or one of the most fortunate teams in the country in that regard. And like I said, Purdue's trying to, deny the rim without a lack of a rim protector. And that's actually led to Purdue turning teams over at a super high clip. But they haven't really played any teams that secure the ball all that well. They play teams like Indiana. We saw it against Michigan. Michigan just gives the ball to the other team. So I don't know how much of that was
They just
Purdue.
say, "Here, take it, please."
Like Danny Wolf just gets into a 4-5 pick and roll and thinks he has to make a pass somewhere He just tries to dump it off the Golden, and I don't know. It's ugly. That's a whole other topic at some point. I'm completely out on that Michigan team at this point. But I do think Iowa isn't really going to be bothered by Purdue's, I don't know if you want to call it ball pressure. I think it's more the style that's forcing Purdue to get all these turnovers. But Iowa's elite taking care of the basketball, and they're elite shooting the three. I think they can really space out this Purdue defense. Like Trey Kaufman-Renn might be in hell trying to guard one of these one of these Iowa shooters on the perimeter. I think it's really going to break down this Purdue defense. And Iowa's 10th in turnover rate in the country, and they're 12th in 3-point percentage. So if there was ever a spot for Purdue to have negative shooting regression on the defensive end, it's right here against Iowa. I think they're going to have a ton of opportunities to win from over the top. And on the other side of the ball, like Iowa's defense is horrendous. It's easily the worst defense in the Big Ten, and it's always scary to back a defense that's this bad. They're practically a layup line a lot of the time against teams that can take care of the ball. But I do think their ball pressure can actually have a lot of success against Purdue. Outside of Braden Smith, I don't really trust any ball handlers on this team besides maybe CJ Cox, who they've been playing a little bit more often. Like, I don't trust Fletcher Lawyer as a secondary ball handler at all. We've seen this story before for Purdue, and they've lost 3 games against teams that are pressure-based defenses, albeit probably slightly better pressure-based defenses. But like Marquette, they gave them a ton of issues. I believe Purdue only scored 58 points in that game. Penn State absolutely dominated them on their home floor. Yeah, like Penn State's defense has regressed a ton. It has not been very good in league play, and Purdue looked pretty terrible against that defense to start Big Ten play. And A&M gave them real issues as well. Those are 3 pressure-based defenses, and Iowa is pretty similar in that regard. They're top 60 in the country in turnover rate on the defensive side. So I do think they can actually create some stops in that area. Though another issue is Owen Freeman just got announced out for the season, but I actually don't know how important he is in this game. Like, yeah, you need him a little bit for Trey Kaufman-Renn, but they were going to double the post regardless. So I don't really think it's really going to be all that important. And they were horrendous on the glass anyway. So I don't really know how much of a role he would really play in this game anyway. And it's going to give some other Iowa bigs an opportunity. They're going to rotate more guys in there. And I believe that front court's going to play with a lot more energy to try to fill in the gap, at least for this one game, without Owen Freeman. Owen Freeman's great in the long term, but I do think there's some other guys in this team that can play well at the 5 spot in the short term. Like I said, this is an ugly bet, but I think it's a pretty perfect matchup for Iowa. If they can't generate turnovers, it could be a long night, but I do actually trust them to get that done here.
Yeah, I remember I watched an Iowa game earlier this year against, I think it was Utah, and that game was basically a layup line until finally, like, Iowa just outscored them and got the job done. But we'll see what happens tomorrow night. Like, I remember that Penn State Purdue game. Penn State just gave them fits and turned them over and over and over. Smith even turned the ball over, I think, like 5 times in that game. So, he's had some high turnover games this year. So it's not like he's immune to that. So I don't mind the spot. I think Iowa, they're a desperate team, seeking out high quality wins. But I wouldn't be surprised at all to see them cover here at home. Purdue seems to be, again, back to like the upper end of their market.
Absolutely. I mean, this is like the ultimate buy low, sell high in this league. Like, Iowa couldn't be playing any worse at this point, and I don't think they're going to solve much of their defensive issues. But in this one particular matchup, I think it's a decent spot for them.
Yeah. And then the last play for tomorrow, we do have a couple leans we're going to talk about here in a second, but the last one, Mountain West, Wyoming plus 7.5 against Iowa State.
Yeah, let's go back to the Mountain West here. It's partially a fade of Utah State, but I'm actually pretty in on what this Wyoming team's done lately. But for Utah State, their defense is regressing pretty heavily of late. They're getting kind of carved up on the interior with this zone defense that they're playing. And I think Wyoming has the shooting ability to shoot over the top of this Utah State zone when they're not creating value inside the arc. Like guys like Obi Abim, Kobe Newton, and Dante Allen could have massive days from three. I think they're all extremely talented shooters. And the fact that Wyoming's already seen this zone once, it is a pretty funky zone that Jared Calhoun throws out there. So I think being familiar with the zone and knowing how to attack it is a pretty big advantage the second time around, because that's basically why this defense was so good early in the season, because nobody really knew what Calhoun was going to throw out there. They mixed in some press. They mixed in. It's more of like a matchup zone, but it has a lot of 2-3 principles. So I do think Wyoming can have a lot of success, and they only lost by 3 at Utah State early in the season. So I think they found a little bit of a recipe the first time around to score on this defense. And Wyoming on the defensive side of the ball they have a pretty deep front court rotation that can keep Utah State off the glass. Utah State loves to attack the offensive glass, but Wyoming's 76 nationally in defensive rebound rate, and they have 5 or 6 different bigs that they can throw out there and keep Carson Templin and Alvin Gadaretse off the glass. I think they should have a ton of success there, and they also do a great job.
Shout out Stetson.
Yeah, for Gadaretse, he's actually been really good for Utah State this year. He's been probably their best big. So, but I think Wyoming also does a really nice job defending in transition. They're 29th percentile in transition opportunities allowed per synergy, and Utah State loves to run. And the drop coverage defense of Utah State of Wyoming it'll force Utah State to operate and pick and roll more. So I think that's an advantage for Wyoming, as Utah State doesn't really grade out in that area. And I do think there's more regression coming for Utah State, they've struggled to win by margin in league play. I think they're pretty fortunate to be sitting even at, I believe they're 9-2 right now, coming off a loss to New Mexico, but I think their record looks way better than it actually should. 7 of their 9 wins in league play are by 7 points or less. And that's against teams like, I believe they beat Fresno by like 11, but Wyoming by 3. Like San Jose State was a super close game. And so against teams at the bottom of the league, they're not able to win by margin. And you could consider Wyoming to be at the bottom of the league, but I do love that they're getting 7.5 here at home.
Yeah. I'll be interested to see this one. This feels like one of those games that maybe Vegas knows something, because it's like, why, they're 3-point, they lost by 3 at Utah State, and now here we are, they're 7.5-point dogs at home. So
yeah.
Like it definitely, like it feels like the right side 100%. It's just one of those ones that you're like, what am I missing?
Yeah, I just think Utah State is kind of they're certainly regressing on both ends of the floor. And I think Wyoming was like an 18-point dog at Utah State and ended up, only losing that game by 3, and actually had a lead for a decent portion of that game.
Is this just like an overvaluing of Utah State?
Yeah, absolutely. And Wyoming's trending upward. Like there's a lot of offensive talent on the perimeter for this team. And I think Sonny Wicks is a great coach. So I love getting the 7.5 here. I wouldn't be surprised if Wyoming won this game outright. Like it's not an easy place to play in the elevation, and typically better environments, or a better home court environment than they have this year, because they're just not all that great. It's not the days of Hunter Maldonado and Graham Ike anymore. So the crowds aren't great, but I still think it's a tough place to play with the elevation.
Yeah. We also have a couple leans for tomorrow, both out of the Big Ten. Indiana plus 9.5 at Wisconsin, and Minnesota plus 8.5 at Penn State.
Yeah, I kind of like the number on Indiana. I think their talent can play up in this spot against a Wisconsin defense that isn't going to bother you in any area. Just a heavy drop coverage defense that doesn't really have any great perimeter defenders by any means. I think Umar Ballo and Malik Renew can also have success in the post-up game that Wisconsin will never double down in the post. So I think Ballo should have success against Stephen Crowell. But Miles Rice and guys like, I don't think Caden Carlisle is really in the rotation anymore, but if Miles Rice is feeling comfortable on the perimeter and not turning the ball over, he's actually a really good guard. So I think they're pretty live to keep this game close and potentially win at Wisconsin. And this is a Wisconsin team that I'm pretty high on, but And Indiana on the defensive side, they don't really foul, and Wisconsin creates a lot of their offensive value by getting to the free throw line because they're the best free throw shooting team in the country, and I think they're on pace to actually be the best free throw percentage team of all time. They're shooting like 85% from the line, and I think Indiana can keep them off the line to an extent.
Crazy to think. Tyler Wall leaves. They finally make free throws, right?
Crazy concept.
Um, and then Minnesota was the other one, plus 8.5 against Penn State.
Yeah, mostly just I don't trust Penn State to really win by any sort of margin, and Ben Johnson's teams play at a super slow pace, and they've taken care of the ball much better in league play. So I don't expect a ton of possessions here with a Minnesota team that will keep you out of transition and play as few possessions as possible. And they've been trending up lately. I mean, they lost on Saturday to Washington, but it's a Washington team that's pretty undervalued in my opinion. And I don't really think Dawson Garcia has a guy on the Penn State side that can match up with him. It's not going to be an official play by any means, but just if you're looking for extra action, that would be the side that I'm looking at in that game.
Yep. And then Wednesday, no official lines are out yet, so we have no official plays. But be sure to stay tuned in the Discord, the action account, if you want to be up to date on what we do end up going with for Wednesday. But we do have a few leans based on projected lines that we want to talk about real quick. First one we talked about on our regular episode yesterday a little bit. Missouri +6 at Tennessee.
Yeah, I would be surprised if this line is 6. I mean, especially with Ziegler and Milicic, if they're back in the rotation, this should be closer to 10 or 11. But I think if Ziegler and Milicic don't play, this would be the only way I play this side. I think the second game without those guys is going to make a real impact. And Tennessee, that wasn't their Super Bowl by any means. Like they're playing a team at home. It's I wouldn't really consider their Super Bowl. They're a top 10 team in the entire country, but their offense didn't look all that inspiring by any means. And I think Missouri's guards can take care of the ball well enough and have enough success from the perimeter to at least keep this game close. And yeah, like I said, Tennessee's offense just didn't look good. So the side I would be on is Missouri. Probably not playing this regardless, but just the way I would lean in a bigger game.
Yeah, Missouri's been great. I mean, what are they? They're up to 15th in the country now. Probably
Yeah,
the
probably
highest.
overvalued, but
Yeah, for sure. But probably the highest they've been ranked, and I don't know how long.
I think they
So
might have got there a couple of years ago in Gates' first year. I think they were close.
yeah,
I know they're
but
top 25. I don't think they got the 15.
yeah. Either way, they're playing good ball. Next one, Illinois -8.5 at Rutgers. Illinois had that come from behind win yesterday against Ohio State at home. They were 6.5-point favorites yesterday. Now the 8.5 on the road.
Yeah, just a team that I'm buying into a little bit more now that they're completely healthy. And I love the changes to the starting lineup that they made. They took Kylan Boswell out of the starting lineup and put Dre Gibbs Lawhorn in the lineup, and they took Hummerkaus out of the starting lineup and put Morez Johnson in, who is just an absolute animal on the glass. I felt like he grabbed every single miss that Illinois had. They were all over the glass against Ohio State, and they could do the same thing here against Rutgers, they're just not really a good team right now. I don't think Harper is going to play the rest of the season. If I were to guess, his ankle is pretty messed up right now, and they've been trying to hide him on the injury report a little bit, but I can pretty much assure you that he's not going to play in this game. I don't think there's any reason to push him before even like conference tournament play because there's no at-large possibility for this team. So, but my only concern with this game would be Ace Bailey just kind of going nuclear one-on-one and against the deep drop coverage of Illinois is he can hit a million shots in the mid-range and keep this game super close. So ultimately not playing this. I don't know if it's going to be 8.5. I feel like it's going to be a little bit shorter. The markets have been a little bit more down on Illinois than the like projection site. Like Torvik has this 8.5, and I believe they had the line against Ohio State at like 10 or 11, and that closed like 6.5 or 7. So this could be 6, 5.5, and I would consider Illinois at that number, but ultimately most likely not playing it just because of the variance Illinois brings sometimes.
Yeah, yeah. And then the last one, you really got to like basketball if you're going to watch this game. Butler at Seton Hall. Butler -5 is the projected line, but man, you couldn't catch me dead watching this game.
Yeah, I mean, I unfortunately watched a decent amount of it the first time around when they were at Butler, mostly because I had money on Seton Hall on Butler, and was a pretty bad beat with Chauncey Jenkins hitting a three at the buzzer, down 8 to cover the 5.5 that I had. So not ideal there. But this is a fate of Seton Hall. This team has no idea where they're at right now. This team, like Shaheen Holloway teams, typically are elite on the defensive side, but he's been trying to figure out how to generate offense, and that in turn has created a pretty horrendous defense now. They're outside the top 150 on both sides of the ball now. That's just not typical of a Shaheen Holloway team. And they're playing a lot more guards. There's not really a true rim protector in the lineup. So it's been basically a disaster. And I think Butler's a pretty undervalued team in general. They've been pretty unlucky throughout conference play. They've lost a lot of games in this league by single digits against the top of the league, against good competition. Like lost to UConn by single digits, played super close with Marquette both times around. So kept it close against St. John's. I think they're fairly undervalued. And when there's a game like this that a win is in reach for them, I think they're going to play more motivated. So that's definitely the side I'm on. It would have to be a little bit shorter of a number for me to play Butler here, but that's the side I would be on.
Yeah. Shaheen Holloway might be staring down the barrel here pretty soon of getting let go. I don't know. You know, I know he's an alum, played there, right? It's a tough situation, but you know the way the program has trended, he's probably going to be looking for a new job here. If I had to guess, at the very latest, the end of next season.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate because I think his hands are kind of tied. There's no NIL here. Like, biggest reason why Kadari Richmond left. It's like they weren't going to give him I think he got like 2 mil to go play at St. John's. So leaving for a rival just for money is it's a little bit unfortunate for Shaheen Holloway and the program in general, but they just don't have the funds apparently or the backing to go out and get any sort of high end recruits. But I think he did all he could with his team early in the season. Like he kept it close against some really good teams with an elite defense, and then he eventually figured out that he had one of the worst offenses in the entire country and tried to solve that. And in turn, it made their defense bad on the other side too.
Yeah, and before we wrap things up, I wanted to give a quick shout out to another coach who's announced he's stepping down at the end of the season. Florida State's Leonard Hamilton. He'll be 77 in August, but time just has run its course. I think he had a great career. Won Conference Coach of the Year 5 times between the Big East and the ACC. Led his team to 3 Sweet 16s and Elite 8. You know, heck of a career, but I think the game has just kind of passed him by at this point.
Yeah, for sure. And then the whole scandal he's kind of dealing with right now, I don't know if that really forced him out by any means. I don't know how true that is either, but those teams that he had around like the COVID time, like with the Scotty Barnes Florida State team, was one of my favorite teams to watch, and that team had true national championship upside. And that, like when I think of a Leonard Hamilton team, that's exactly what I think of is Scotty Barnes, and those guards that they had in the backcourt were pretty incredible to watch, and they were just super fun up and down.
Yeah, they were 26-5 in that COVID shortened season. So pretty unfortunate we didn't get a tournament that year because they would have been a fun team to watch in that one, I think.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you know, other than that, pretty good day of games tomorrow. A little bit of a weaker slate Wednesday, Thursday, but we'll be back with another Best Bets episode Thursday for the weekend. Good luck on the wagers we've given out and anything else you guys might be playing. And as I said earlier in the episode, make sure you get in the Discord because always that's where all the plays go, player props, everything. So if you want to be up to date on that stuff and any changes or things we might be adding late, be sure to join that so you're up on that. But other than that, good luck on everything, and we'll talk to you in the next episode.